I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of Old's Oscar Countdown. Another second bonus episode of the week. Wanted to do a quick episode here, just breaking down the Critics' Choice Awards. The nominations just came out a few minutes ago, a few hours ago now, and I wanted to bring you my kind of initial thoughts, reactions, what this means for the race, and how we're really at a critical point, I think. The first big award show, the first big kind of precursor at predicting the Oscars, I think is going to also balance well with the Golden Globe nominations, which if you haven't checked out, I give my predictions for those. I'll also be giving my reactions to that category once we get those on Monday. So going to do a couple of these back-to-back reaction and analysis videos. But if you're new to the channel, welcome. What I do each and every week is talk about a different Oscar category and do a breakdown as to what I think is going to get nominated. But along the way, we're also going to be talking about these precursor award shows, these other type of award shows like Critics' Choice or Golden Globes. I think I will ultimately end up predicting what's going to win at the Critics' Choice. Didn't want to do a nominations prediction just because there are so many categories and also so many potential options. And for the most part, they're pretty chalk. They're pretty standard. The Golden Globes are a little bit more interesting, a little bit more fun, so I do it for them, and also a little bit less categories. But we will eventually predict the winners. That's kind of coming up. Right now, though, I want to do a brief episode here, just giving my thoughts and what I think ultimately is important. So what I want to do and how I want to structure this video is to talk about 3 risers and 3 fallers. Because at the end of the day, when you take a look at some of these precursor award shows, you use them to ultimately help predict the Oscars, that being the big one. At least here on Old Oscar Countdown, that's what we are counting down towards. So we try to take kind of signs to see, okay, where are people thinking, where are they kind of putting their thoughts and their appreciations towards. And I mentioned why I think this award show and the Golden Globes are going to be really crucial, because we know that the Academy has become increasingly international over the years, but they still have a large American voting body. And I think that's the difference between the two groups here, where the Critics' Choice Awards will be helpful at helping us understand what the American critics, and therefore maybe the American members of the Academy kind of like. And then you also have the Golden Globes, which are maybe more of an international group, and we'll appreciate more of those movies. So that will give us an understanding of what the international kind of branch of the Academy is thinking. So we can kind of use a combination of both the Golden Globes and Critics' Choice to ultimately help us understand some things, with the ultimate caveat being both those award shows are, don't include any Oscar voters. Ultimately, the ones that we want to look at, the most important ones, are BAFTA, or SAG, or DGA. But in particular with this year, with BAFTA nominations not coming out until after Oscar nominations, we're going to have to rely on some of these more critical type award shows more than ever. And what I also want to do for each risers and fallers category is talk about how important this is, or maybe on the faller side, kind of my panic meter, and essentially how seriously you should be taking this in terms of, oh, we saw this got a nomination. Is that definitely going to happen for the Oscars? Or can we kind of ignore that? And then this is kind of a Critics' Choice type of a thing. How impactful kind of will it be? Panic meter, and then how important it is. So we'll start off with the risers at the top. The first riser I want to talk about is Train Dreams. Got a huge boost this morning, getting nomination for Best Picture, also getting in for Joel Edgerton for Best Actor, as well as cinematography and screenplay. A huge kind of sign of support there. Also got in for original song, although that was somewhat expected. I think the Joel Edgerton nomination was not that expected, at least on my part, so was surprised and glad to see him ultimately get nominated. And even the movie, the general sign of support for it to get in for picture is a strong sign over movies like Avatar, over movies like, you could say, the international films like No Other Choice. So while I think it's maybe on the outside still for Best Lead Actor, Joel Edgerton could be in that 5th slot, and I think Train Dreams is in contention for a lot of those 5th slots. Earlier I talked about, earlier in the week, the cinematography category, and how I have Train Dreams getting in for that 5th spot. It could definitely get in for adapted screenplay in that 5th spot, maybe beating out Frankenstein. Still don't have it in for actor, I think, although Edgerton is a contender for sure. Maybe have it in for best adapted screenplay. I think I still have it in for cinematography. And then even for picture, there is a path for it, absolutely. Even if you include the international films like No Other Choice and It Was Just an Accident and The Secret Agent. If you don't think Avatar or Wicked are getting in, well, then that kind of 10th slot is up to, I think, an American film. Whether that be Begonia, whether that be Jay Kelly, or whether that be Train Dreams. I think right now that kind of slot can go either to Train Dreams or to Jay Kelly, depending on what happens. If Joel Edgerton gets in that 5th spot for actor, well, then maybe it gets in for screenplay and cinematography and gets in for picture. Or the opposite, maybe Jay Kelly gets in for Clooney for actor and then screenplay and then maybe casting and then picture. Like, there are some paths for some of these American films, and right now, at least in the picture rankings, Train Dreams getting in for picture I think is actually the most important element, and just the general sign of support from critics here showcased to me that this is still a contender, and then this could potentially get in that kind of 10 slot for picture, and maybe even get in for something like a screenplay, maybe even a Joel Edgerton for Best Actor. So how important is this on a scale of 1 to 10? I give it a 6. I think this is a movie that could have been restricted to just kind of top critical lists, but has this kind of more broad sign of support, surprising or getting kind of solid nominations in actor and in picture and in screenplay, as well as getting in the kind of expected cinematography and song nominations. I think this is a real kind of sign of support and help boost up my rankings, where there's a real possibility now that it gets in for picture, whereas a couple weeks ago I thought that wasn't really the case. Then my other riser I wanted to talk about would be Jay Kelly. This is similar to Train Dreams, although maybe not as performed as well necessarily. I think I was a little bit more expecting to get in for picture, but the fact that it got in for picture is still strong. Clooney not getting in wasn't great, but Adam Sandler for Jay Kelly still getting in. Interestingly, got in for casting as well as best screenplay. So I see it similarly to Train Dreams, as I mentioned. It is kind of competing for that last best picture spot. It just depends on, do you like Clooney or Edgerton in terms of their chances for Best Lead Actor? Do you still think Adam Sandler has a chance for maybe Best Supporting Actor? So it wasn't maybe as surprised with Jay Kelly's performance. That being said, still got in for picture, still got in for screenplay, did kind of get in for casting as well, so sign of support there. Just a general kind of overall appreciation that the campaigning that Netflix is doing is working. It is competing still for Best Picture, but maybe nothing too surprising, but still wanted to kind of give it its credit, its flowers, because it did get in for Best Picture. They have been really campaigning aggressively. Adam Sandler did get in for Jay Kelly over, let's say, someone like a Delroy Lindo for Sinners. So there is still an appreciation amongst critics for the film. So in terms of how important this is, I probably only give it a 4. We knew it was in contention. This just maybe solidifies my understanding that it is a real contender and should be considered for that kind of 9-10 Best Picture slot. And I wouldn't even rule out Clooney for Best Lead Actor either. That 5th slot for Best Actor is really up in the air. And then the third riser that I wanted to talk about, which is maybe the biggest winner of the nominations this morning, is Sentimental Value. This was the big kind of takeaway, I guess you could say, from the nominations morning, was that Critics' Choice did kind of things as expected, which is that they preferred American movies and less so international films. We'll talk about the international films that are performing a little bit later in the faller section, but they never really go for them anyways. But the fact that they went for ultimately international film and Sentimental Value in so many of these main categories, picture and director, and both in supporting actress and actor and actress, there was a little bit of concern on my side that maybe Sentimental Value by the general public wasn't as well beloved and was slipping a bit in its Best Picture rankings. I think this solidified that it still is a major contender and is still very well liked, and not only for acting nominations, but also director and screenplay. So there was an overall appreciation for the film, and I do think what it confirms to me is my thinking was that this is a good movie for the Oscars because it has American appeal and international appeal. Because essentially you have the Critics' Choice Awards who don't really like international films. Like they only nominated in the zone of interest here one nomination for Best International Feature. Same thing with, I remember, All Quiet on the Western Front. I think it was nominated for one nomination at Critics' Choice Awards, and then went on to win like 5 Oscars and almost won Best Picture. So they have a bias against foreign language films, international films. So the fact that Sentimental Value got nominated here in a way signals to me that they don't necessarily even think of it as international film. They think of it as, maybe a half international, half American movie, and tells me that the largely American Critics' Choice branch, the American kind of taste of maybe the Academy, still will appreciate this movie, and then it will have kind of that cross appeal of both American voters really liking it, but also you would expect international voters to also appreciate it. Just gives a real sign of support. So in terms of how important this is, I think it's an 8. I really do think that it's huge sign of support here from Critics' Choice Awards as technically international films, but still being super well supported by Critics' Choice gives us that assurance that whether it be the international branch or whether it be the American branch, this movie has widespread support, and I think you can feel confident getting a lot of those key nominations, for at least 3 acting nominations. I think definitely picture, definitely screenplay, and kind of lock it in there and not have to worry about it potentially falling or slipping. Okay, now let's talk about some fallers, movies that didn't do as well at the nominations, that maybe have us a little bit more concerned. So the first one, I think, the obvious one that I mentioned is the international films generally. No Jafar Panahi for Best Director. No, It Was Just an Accident. The Secret Agent didn't get in for Picture or Director. Did get in for Wagner Moura, which was nice to see and good for that movie's chances. No Other Choice Love. So not even in something like Actor, which was not surprising, but something that you have to ultimately mention. And it brings back to my point that, like I mentioned, All Quiet on the Western Front the year did super well, didn't get that many nominations, only one at Critics' Choice, even Anatomy of a Fall, Zone of Interest. They don't really appreciate the international films as much as the Academy or the Golden Globes. But what it does tell us, and the way I'm going to approach this year, I think, is that Critics' Choice, it's what's the American voters, what are they thinking, what are they doing? Then the Golden Globes, I'm expecting to be heavy international. Those were my predictions. If my predictions come true, then we can kind of have an understanding that, okay, that's what the international members of the branch, the international film-going community, that's what they appreciate. And then you try to find like an interesting mix for the Oscars. That's how I'm going to ultimately look at things. So in terms of a panic meter, it's maybe a 2. You maybe want to see Jafar Panahi in something like director, more nominations generally. That it's not just an international film, that it has maybe some more American appreciation. So, some people were considering Jafar Panahi's film, It Was Just an Accident, to maybe win Best Picture. I think after these nominations, that would be less likely to happen, I think. So panic meter, ultimately still a 2. I'm still very confident that some of these movies will do well, but without a doubt, it shows that they're maybe not Best Picture potential winners necessarily, and that they're still, refined and kind of categorized still to a large group of American voters as other types of movies and won't be as well appreciated as your kind of mainstream auteur-driven American films. Then my second faller would be supporting actress category for Marty Supreme. So both Odessa Zion and Gwyneth Paltrow both missed in this category. I thought one of them would show up here. This is something that you can maybe explain away from the fact that, they maybe haven't seen the film. But then you look at the nominations and you go, well, they nominated Chalamet. They nominated Josh Safdie for picture, or for director. It got in for picture. So they did see the movie, got in for screenplay as well. And even something like, I remember A Complete Unknown, if you want to use a late-breaking Chalamet movie last year, where not a lot of people had seen it. But at Critics' Choice, they still nominated Edward Norton. And he went on to get, nominated at the Oscars. Now, they didn't nominate something like Monica Barbaro, and she eventually did get nominated at the Oscars, so it's not, the supporting actress category, I think, is really still up in the air. There is no clear frontrunner in terms of a win, even in terms of the nominations. That being said, I was a little bit surprised in an expanded category of 6 that, even though they really liked the movie, I couldn't really agree on which of those 2 actresses had the better chance of getting nominated, and then ended up nominating neither of them. So my panic meter is probably at a 6 or a 7, a little bit concerned that you didn't get out in front of saying, this is the one Marty Supreme actress that is definitely likely to get nominated, and instead we didn't get either. It could be a complete unknown situation where it's Elle Fanning or Monica Barbaro, and then over SAG and some of these award shows, there's one that kind of clearly comes out. I'm not ready to rule out something like Odessa Zion, especially as more and more people get to see the film. There's a little bit of concern, though, that still got in for picture, still got in for director. So a lot of people, saw the film, and they couldn't really decide on supporting actress of those 2. So maybe neither of them get nominated. That's a real possibility as well. And then my final kind of disappointment, my final faller, would be Avatar, Fire and Ash. Now, I personally have never had the movie in my Best Picture rankings, but this performance here, in combination with some of the first reactions, the social media reactions, it's pretty good, but maybe not great, a little bit repetitive of the second film, I think pretty much definitively says to me that this is not going to get nominated for Best Picture. This is a largely American branch, and you'd expect that branch to be more appreciative of the Avatar movies, James Cameron being an American-Canadian director. So there's a little bit of concern that it didn't get in for picture, or even some of the below-the-line categories like production design or cinematography. Avatar Way of Water wasn't as big as the first Avatar, but got nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars, and critically at Critics' Choice got in for Best Picture, and production design, and visual effects, and cinematography. So there was support for the second Avatar movie from this group, and now this group, for Fire and Ash, only give it one nomination, visual effects. So I really I'm even more confident, I think, that Avatar is out of the Best Picture lineup, more so than something like Wicked for Good, which you could also say is maybe a faller. Still kind of got in for picture, though, so it is definitely more of a contender, I think. But then missed on Cynthia Erivo for Best Actress, so there's some concerns there. So the way I see it, probably Avatar and Wicked are near the outside of Best Picture. I'm not ready to drop Wicked just yet, but from these kind of the Critics' Choice Awards, it does seem to be that Avatar is kind of not really going to be an awards contender this year, and aside from maybe some of the technical categories, it's probably just most likely in something like visual effects. But those are my thoughts and instant reactions from the Critics' Choice nominations. Stay tuned to Monday, 12 p.m. Eastern Time, or maybe a little bit later. We're going to be doing kind of the Golden Globe nominations reactions. I'll talk a little bit about that, how well I did, and then of course continue to go on in terms of predicting some of the other technical categories for the Oscars. Score and sound, documentaries is a video that's coming up that actually may come up before the Golden Globe nominations. Have to check out when that's going to be releasing, but been working on that video, really happy with how that's going to turn out and very confident in those predictions. So lots of exciting stuff here with Old's Oscar Countdown. As always, let me know your thoughts, how well you did and maybe in your own predictions, and if anything else surprised you that I didn't mention on this video. But that's about it. Until next time, stay tuned.